Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with Rausan Pereira. Petrol and diesel prices were cut across the four metros on Wednesday on March 24th after being kept steady for 23 straight days. Indian Oil Corporation had last increased fuel prices on February 27 to an all-time high of 91.17 rupees in the national capital. The domestic petrol and diesel rates vary across states due to the value-added tax. The oil marketing companies, Bharat Petroleum, Indian Oil Corporation, as well as Hindustan Petroleum, align the prices of domestic fuel with the global benchmarks by taking into account any changes in the foreign exchange rates. Any changes in fuel rates are implemented with effect from 6 a.m. each day. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the rising fuel prices and is there a solution to the problem as far as the common man is concerned. Joining me on the program today are Vineeta Hariharan, public policy expert, Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, consulting editor of the Business Standard, and Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador of India at the WTO. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Ambassador, let me begin the program with you first. Let's analyze, the rising fuel prices. What are the factors that contribute to it? Why is it that the fuel prices are so high in India, especially if you look at petrol nearly touching the century mark?
The importance of the petrol and diesel revenues is extremely significant in the scheme of things for both the center as well as the state. As far as the center is concerned, about 85 to 90% of the central excise duty is central excise duty is collected from petrol and diesel. So it is extremely important. But if you take it as a part of the overall indirect tax revenue, the incidence comes down to about 24%. So, but still, it is very significant. Now, as far as the states are concerned, as we all know, in most states, the VAT revenue or the sales tax of the state, that is the main contributor to the state revenue. Next comes the state excise duties and registration of vehicles and stamp duty, etc., on houses and land. Now, out of that VAT revenue which the state earns, petrol and diesel sales account for a large chunk of it. So, from both the state as well as the central perspective, it is extremely important, the revenue that is collected. The second point is that crude oil prices, and after, they have not really been going up very much for the past 2 months or so. And if we take the refined prices, it comes to approximately 34 rupees or 33 rupees for petrol and diesel. And on top of that, we add the central taxes. They are the central excise duty, the special duty, and the cess. Then we load onto that the state VAT, and it comes to approximately 90 rupees or so for petrol in Delhi, and about 88 rupees for diesel. So the incidence of tax is very high. It is around 65% or so, which is there in most states. If you compare it globally, you will find that in the UK, which is the only country which comes anywhere close to India, it is 61%. But in the US, it is only about 20%. So depending on the country, the rates vary, and in the West, by and large, the duties on petrol and diesel are far, far less than in India. But as I have said, dependence on excise revenue and on VAT revenue on petrol and diesel is a very important contributor to the center and state revenues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So, Shubhamoy, let me bring you in here now. So, since we're talking about central and state taxes, is there a way that, we can do away with these taxes? Is there a way that the states can survive without, by reducing these taxes? What is the issue really? How can we ease the pain of the common man?
Frank, to your question, whether states can do away with these taxes, no. It's the two major taxes that the states ask for, get. One is from liquor, which is the state excise duty. The other is the taxes on petroleum products. And these two essentially hold up state finances. Without these two, no state can actually be solvent in the Indian scheme of things. That is the level of excessive dependence on these. The Finance Commission, the 15th Finance Commission, in fact, went into in detail into this particular issue and found that almost all the states have undertaxed their ability. There is one problem that the states, that the center share and all, which we talk about. The other part is that the state, how much do the states raise their own taxes from other sources? And the 15th Finance Commission was clear with lots of data and which they've shown. And somebody can actually would be interesting for people to read it through. The states do not tax the alternative sources that they have to raise finances. And so, why do they do so? Because it is so much more easy to collect a tax on fuel and tax on liquor. Essentially, you tax the producers, the collection cost is very low, the states therefore depend on them excessively. Issues like property tax, which, or any other alternative sources of taxes, like even taxes on professions, and so many others, which the states can levy, states do not levy. So the problem therefore comes along that now how to redistribute the challenge of high taxes and, as you said, reduce the burden for the common man. In fact, it's a common woman, I suppose, who actually bears the brunt, because in the last few months, we have seen the price of LPG going up very substantially. So her cooking gas, the price of fuel to run the household, domestic household, becomes excessively sharp. And that is where the pain point is. Now, you notice that, first of all, that the taxes, all petroleum products are essentially, as per Article 279 of the Constitution, the GST Council has the right to levy taxes on these goods under the GST, which means that there is no constitutional jump that the states and the centers have to do to be able to tax petroleum products under GST. It is now essentially a question of intention. Now, here, both the center and the states are to blame. The center, for obvious reasons, also finds, just like the states, the petroleum goods very easy to tax. So, therefore, almost 80% of the central excise duties today come from the petroleum products. That includes the cess, which is again a very comfortable thing for the states, for the center to do, and it doesn't have to distribute among the states. And typically, again, it is the center which definitely charges more than the states in terms of the taxes on petroleum products. So there is definitely a case for redistribution of the load. But redistribution between the center and the states, again, will ensure that the states get larger share of the central taxes, of the petroleum taxes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the levy of taxes on petroleum products will come down, because that will simply, that is an important point to ponder. As of now, given the fact that in India has got a low per capita income, so sources of taxes by states on other means, as we just talked about, is states don't want to levy. I do not expect that the percentage incidence of taxes on the petroleum products, it could get redistributed between the center and the states once the GST Council recommends it and there's a different formula. But in terms of reduction of pressure on the common person, the answer is no.
Okay. All right. So, after all that, we get to know that there's really not much there for the common man. But Vineeta, let's take this point of GST forward now. Can GST really be the solution that we are looking for? Petroleum products as fuel. If it is brought under the GST, what will change?
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank, for having me here, and thank you all my fellow panelists. They have already spoken about the percentage of the cost of the petrol being largely from the central excise and the state VAT, which is almost 62%, as Das Gupta ji had just mentioned. So yes, definitely going into the GST regime, there are calculations that show that prove that it could reduce by almost 34 rupees per liter. That's petrol, and almost 22 rupees per liter, that's diesel. So that's the way forward as far as the tax regime is concerned to get into the GST regime. That's what eventually we all will have to go into. All products will have to come under the GST umbrella if we like it or not. But eventually that's going to be streamlined, and it would be for the sustainable benefit of all. So that's how the tax, as far as the tax part is concerned. But perhaps we've missed out this macroeconomic scenario in which the cartelization of the OPEC countries is what is leading to this high initial cost of crude oil, the Brent crude oil per barrel. So it's $54 per barrel today, which was about $20 before the COVID. So it's also because of the sudden spurt in activities post COVID. That's also there's a glaring jump in the prices of fuel because the demand side has also increased, and the supply side has also been simultaneously at the same time reducing their supply because of the larger cartelization that's happening in OPEC countries. So way forward in the long run is to increase our own exploration of oil, of crude oil in the country, which is far below the consumption requirements. It's just about 30 million tons, whereas our consumption requirement is more than 200 million tons. So we have to move beyond public sector organizations, engaging in refinement of crude oil. And we are going in the right direction that way in trying to engage vibrant private sector oil companies also in exploration and refining of crude oil. So I think that's another way forward in the long term to reduce, to have sustainable impacts and reduction of fuel prices. So in the short run, it would be getting into the GST regime, and also as Shubhamoy just mentioned, and also Das Gupta ji mentioned, we have to look at, or states have to look at increasing the spread of revenues, because the centre's done quite a lot in terms of 15th Finance Commission and the 14th Finance Commission rollout in terms of the amount of money that's going to states is huge. Beyond GST. It's not just GST, it's also through 15th Finance, 14th Finance, and the various central government, central sponsored schemes and programs that are being rolled out by the central government. There's a lot of devolution to states. So they should go beyond just VAT and petroleum cess and liquor and fuel, I would say.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So, Mr. Dasgupta, let's take this particular aspect forward, the cartelization of fuel, what's happening really as far as the international market is concerned, and how much of all of that really matters to us.
The first point that I wanted to mention in this context is that the prices indeed had dipped after COVID, and it had come down to around $30 per barrel. But analysts said that was an aberration. It was an emergent situation. That is why the market had reacted in such a manner. The prices would remain, that is the medium-term projection, between $40 and $60, and more likely between $45 and $55. And this trend is likely to continue till the end of 2021. So crude prices and OPEC has these meetings where if the price goes down beyond a certain point, they cut down on their production to boost up the prices. So that is going to take place, and it is basically it is going to be between $45 and $55 per barrel in the near to medium term. Now, can we do something to check it and to intervene and to get a better price? Unless we enter into a long-term arrangement and take the risk, and there is a considerable amount of risk in, let's say, buying crude oil for the next 5 years at $50 per barrel, then the price could go down to 40 or 35 also. So whether we are prepared to take that risk and whether we are prepared to put our money in advance in the hands of the suppliers, part of it, that is a big point. And I don't think the government would be able to do that. So that is one. So there is very little that we can do to have an influence on the prices which the OPEC countries are charging worldwide. Now, as far as securing our own supplies are concerned, we can do it through by hedging, really speaking. We are buying more and more shale oil and gas from the US. We can diversify our imports. So that is possible. The third point which Ms. Hariharan raised was about increasing our activities relating to exploration and to produce more. At the moment, we are only producing about 20% of our total requirements. And that has been more or less steady, despite new oil fields or new sources of oil being developed within India and in our exclusive economic zone. So I don't think, in view of the demand that is going up and the slow rate at which new oil fields are being found, that there is going to be a sudden substitution of domestic oil to take up the percentage beyond 20 to 30, 40. So our dependence on international crude oil will remain. The last point is that we know for a fact that the dependence on petrol and diesel for transportation is likely to undergo a sea change over the next 10 years. First will be the advent and greater usage of electric vehicles based on battery technology. And at some point in future, it could be in 5 years, 10 years, it could be substituted by hydrogen fuel technology. That is, instead of petrol and oil, we use, or gas, we use hydrogen. So this is the likely scenario. And so we should not be too bothered about our sources of crude oil for transportation mainly. As it is in India, we don't have too many power plants which are running on oil. Some of them are running on gas, but most of them are running on coal. So our dependence in the case of electricity is not going to be affected very much by fluctuations in price of international crude oil. Now, the last point which I wanted to mention is that diesel prices have a direct correlation with the index of industrial production in India, and that has been tracked over some time. So, of course, which one is really the cause and which is the effect is difficult to say, but the diesel prices don't really depend on the index of industrial production. So it could be safely concluded that our industrial activities get slowed down if the diesel prices go up very much. And since we have stopped giving subsidies for diesel, our industrial production also has been affected to a certain extent. Now, the point about prices also, the impact on domestic consumers, whether they are industrial consumers or household consumers, also needs to be seen in this perspective. The weight of fuel and power, which includes electricity, is about 13 in 100 in the wholesale price index. It is approximately 6 or 6.4 in the consumer price index, which includes also the LPG which is consumed. So if we keep on increasing the prices of diesel and petrol by imposing taxes whether at the central or the state level, it is going to have an inflationary effect.
Absolutely. Right. So let me take a couple of aspects forward with you, Shubhamoy. The first one being, of course, this issue of oil exploration. Is it cost effective for us to be getting into it, since we are going to be moving to other sources of energy, cleaner fuel? That is something that, the government has been pushing for. The Prime Minister himself has taken a lead really as far as using cleaner fuels and cleaner energy is concerned. So how much of sense does it make for us to get into oil exploration at this point in time?
Well, that's actually a very interesting point, Frank, you raised, because the Indian energy basket, which has a predominant share of coal, followed by oil and natural gas and renewables. In that context, if we look at where we are planning to go, it does seem that we shouldn't be, but maybe that's not the correctest way to look at it. Why? Because the renewable energy, I mean, even now, for instance, about as on February 2021, I think it's about 93 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity has been installed in the country. But even looking at that, if we look at the total demand that we need and I'm talking just for the power sector, we will be needing a huge amount of expansion even in coal. Similarly, for oil, the oil sector, as of now, I mean, we are saying that we will not be needing oil because we are shifting our transportation fleet to electricity. Electricity would be coming along and we are hoping that will be largely be powered by renewable energy and some by thermal energy. But that is going to be a plan of something like 10 to 15 years when we are able to migrate, especially our trucks and buses, the heavy duty stuff. So what happens till then? Till then, obviously, India's energy demand, the transportation energy demand, will be dominated by oil. And at current production levels, we have about 85% dependent on foreign on imports. We are expecting to go up to almost 90% very soon. So essentially, our oil fields are, first of all, too mature. They are reaching the end of their productive life. Given that condition, the exploration of oil that we are planning to do is necessary even to keep certain amount, like even to keep that 10% on. It's that bad as it is in terms of the ability of the Indian fields to be able to produce oil. So we are looking at a fairly stressed scenario in terms of the imports and in terms of the oil requirements. Given that condition, there is no go but to look out always for possibilities of getting fresh supplies of oil from some places that we can. And incidentally, you would notice that from in the successive rounds that we have had of NELP as well as of the OLP, it's an alphabet basket of letters, which basically means that in the successive exploration policies, the success rates have not been very high. The success rates have not been very high for oil. For gas, we have had a better strike rate. For oil, we have not had too many success rates. We have had some small fields in which we have been able to dig up, but not in too high a measure. So the sum that comes along is that we need to explore. Probably we need to do even better by tying up with companies abroad and what we call the equity petrol, which basically means that we buy into stakes in companies abroad, and we just don't buy the equity part, but we also buy into the production part. The ONGC Videsh so far what has been doing is it has been buying equity in companies. So it's giving it a good return, but it's not been translating into oil supply. Sure. Probably we need to do that sort of stuff. And we need to, and of course it's difficult because no country really wants to get into that sort of no company wants to get into that sort of a production sharing arrangement. But we need to do all the sort of stuff to ensure that in the transition till the time we are able to really be able to say by 2030 and that when our buses and trucks are moving largely into electricity powered vehicles, in this intervening period of 10 years, we have the oil fields. And if that, then that essentially means that we have actually got to be able to have explored and got them into sort of, starting into production regimes by now. Because only those which have come into production regime by now or has been contracted now will be coming into production by 2030. So yeah, Frank.
Absolutely. All right. So that's probably a strategy that we can employ, So let me bring you in, Vineeta, how as far as oil exploration is concerned, clearly there are several challenges. These challenges need to be met head on because our dependency on oil is going to be there for at least another decade because we largely run on oil. So, from that perspective, what sense does it make for us to tie up with experts in this field and get into a joint venture kind of a scene, something that Shubham is pointing out to, and take that forward? That is one aspect. Looking at other solutions, strategic oil reserves, increasing them, they have been increased in the recent past, but how much will that help really?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at our reserves of oil, crude oil, it's around 600 million metric tons, but we've only been able to refine about 30 million metric tons for consumption, whereas the consumption is 200. So there's a gap between the reserves available and the amount that we're able to provide for consumption. So really, we need to improve that. Makes a case in point for improving the efficacy of the whole production process. So it's being dominated. I mean, it could be predominantly public sector like the ONGC and just one or two private sector operators in this whole production of crude oil. So the country, I think, is going the right direction as far as involving private sector organization and international collaborations for production of crude oil. So that's a way forward in the right direction. I couldn't agree more with Shubhamoy on that. And secondly, about moving towards other sources of energy beyond petrol and coal. Coal, again, we have huge reserves, which is going to last us for many, many years to come. So we really don't need to do or discard our reserves of crude oil and coal, but we need to improve our efficacy of production of clean energy from both the sources. And moving towards renewable has to be done simultaneously, I would say, which again, we are going in the right direction. The government of the day with huge aggressive targets with 450 gigawatt by 2030. So I think that's the right direction to go. But on the demand side, on the consumption side, also we need to deploy the patterns of consumption in a more effective manner through enforcement of public policies in a better way in terms of actually improving the consumption of solar energy or making it rather enforceable in every house, So we need to deploy these kind of policies. We need to integrate that into our bylaws, building bylaws, wherein we have solar energy as one of the mandatory sources of energy, at least as a complementary source. So renewable energy is a complementary source of energy from the conventional. So that's how I think simultaneously we can go not really drastically moving from conventional to non-conventional, but simultaneously move towards that, and in the long term move towards largely predominantly renewable energy powered country.
All right, time to get closing comments now from all my panelists with the best way forward and how we can bring about some kind of relief really as far as the Aam Aadmi is concerned. Starting first with you, Ambassador.
I think the points that have been made are very well taken. We need to make public transportation, for instance, in the larger cities and the tier 2 cities much more efficient and much better available. That is going to reduce the dependence on private vehicles and consumption of petrol. Similarly, the railways have got a much better share now of transport of goods post-COVID, and that is something which could be raised. And the other point is inland waterways is something which has not really been explored very much, but the government has taken initiatives to do that now. So that is also going to reduce the usage of diesel to a great extent, because the inland transportation uses diesel, but far less than trucks do. So these are some of the strategies. There are others as well, which can reduce our dependence on petrol and diesel for transportation purposes. And that is something which we need to do. Two, if the 15th Finance Commission's recommendations are accepted about sharing of 41% of the excise revenue, that is going to really, reduce the share of the central government. And if it is to be included in the GST petrol and diesel, then the maximum slab available is 28%, unless the government changes it. And in which case, 28% will bring down the duties on diesel and petrol and the price to about 48 rupees or so for both petrol and diesel. So that is something which the government needs to ponder over.
Absolutely. All right. Shubhamoy?
Yeah, Frank, both Vineeta ji and Jayant ji have made some very significant points. And essentially, there isn't much to add there. I would just say that possibly given the constraints that we are discussing here, it is time that political parties, whichever side of the government they're on, give a much more accurate idea to the people about what are the constraints and what are the challenges. One area where there could be where there could be harmony is that LPG prices, for instance, it'll rise, but at least could the poorer people be sheltered like they were done last year? But to do that, the people in the better off people in the cities, those who are buying petrol and diesel will have to fork out a bit more money. That sort of clear enunciation of support will possibly be very useful. LPG today largely serves rural areas. Piped gas serves urban areas. So the clear distinction can be made. But to do that, obviously, would mean that the urban middle class needs to take on a bit more burden. No, but for that, all that to happen, the political signaling, and I think it has to come from both, ruling parties in every state, the center, they all have to be more, I would say, honest in what they're saying about pricing of petrol and diesel. Then the people will be willing to take on the sacrifice and willing and accept that there's to be a share given. I would say that is the message that should go out for the benefit of the common person.
All right. And Vineeta, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. So already, laid out the way forward in the last conversation bit that we had. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with Genji when he talked about the public transport through alternate fuels. The metros and the buses powered by CNG. So I think we need to have public policies which promote usage of public transport much more, like we see in other countries where even the prime minister or the ministers of the day take the public transport. There has to be more demonstration of that to the common man, and make it more. I think maybe even more, economical to the common man, the usage of public transport. That's one. And second, about the LPG, yes, we have gone in the right direction with certain programs like the Ujjwala program, etc., where LPG cylinders were highly subsidized. So that's the way to go forward. Then also improve, have bicycle tracks in cities. A lot of urban planning elements also needed. Walk to work concepts and transit-oriented development. These are some things which the government should promote much more. And of course, alternate sources of fuel, we are getting there. We are on the right track. And as an immediate relief to the common man, I think it's getting under the GST banner would be the immediate relief that we could give to the common man.
All right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that taxes on fuel are a major revenue generator for both the state and the central governments, and they find it easy to tax fuel. Hence, there is very little that can be done to ease the pain of the common man. Oil prices are also directly linked with the international oil prices, so there is not much that Indian government can do to influence the pricing. As an immediate relief, fuel can be brought under the ambit of the GST, and since the maximum tax slab is 28%, the prices will immediately come down drastically. However, that is a political decision that the states and the center will have to jointly take. We can also reduce our dependency on oil by using public transportation and things like inland waterways wherever possible for transportation of goods rather than the roadways. These are some measures that can be taken in the short term. In the long run, we have to explore our own sources of oil and move away from fossil fuels completely to cleaner forms of energy. Well, that's it from me. See you again next time. But before I leave, let me thank you once again for being here. Remember to like and subscribe to Bharata First on YouTube, and also follow Bharata First on social media as well. I need your support now, more so than ever. Please spread the word.